Hey, it's the Rogers Take podcast. I'm Roger. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has recently ordered all city agencies to reduce their budgets by 15% to offset the cost of caring for and housing asylum seekers. These asylum seekers have been arriving in New York City as homeless immigrants every day since 2022, when southern border states like Arizona began busing them to the various so-called sanctuary cities around the country. Of all the sanctuary cities, however, New York has been hit the hardest, with over 140,000 arriving in the past year alone. In addition, the city is estimated to have spent over $1.5 billion to care for and house these people, which the city is required by local laws to do for any homeless person or family. Further, they are required to provide these services within 24 hours after arrival. In order to meet these requirements, New York has been utilizing all available spaces, including vacant hotels, gymnasiums, established shelters, etc. But New York and other sanctuary cities are bursting at the seams and unable to sustain the influx of asylum seekers unless they receive help from the federal government. But Mayor Adams takes it a step further, and I happen to agree with him, in that financial support alone is not enough. There needs to be a comprehensive federal policy to deal with the specific issue of asylum seekers, including allowing them to work while awaiting approval for their asylum request. Only then can the crisis truly be resolved. But let me explain. Asylum seekers, of course, are immigrants, and all immigration issues, including policy and enforcement, are the sole responsibility of the federal government's executive branch. Further, no city, state, or local government can change or amend the policy unless done through and with the consent of the executive branch of the government. Now, it is true that numerous cities around the country have declared themselves to be sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants, also known as undocumented residents. On the basis of this, these cities will not assist or take any part in any deportation efforts by the federal government. In fact, these mostly democratic cities believe that any particular illegal immigrant who has been here for years and who is a working, law-abiding contributor to the community ought to be given a pathway to citizenship rather than deportation. And as a liberal, I fully support and agree with this approach. But prior to the arrival of the asylum seekers, sanctuary cities like New York had been managing illegal immigrants with compassion and without any major issues. But this is in stark contrast to the mostly Republican non-sanctuary cities and states, including southern border states, who have been assisting the federal government in more aggressive and unethical deportation efforts, especially during the Donald Trump presidency. But again, these are illegal immigrants, not asylum seekers. In any event, as a result of these aggressive and unethical efforts, many immigrants who would have entered the country illegally are now choosing to simply declare themselves to be asylum seekers. The reason being that federal laws require that after passing initial screening and processing at the border, all asylum seekers must be permitted into the country without limit. Now, this is not to suggest that these new asylum seekers don't have legitimate claims, but rather that as a result of Trump's unethical and possibly illegal efforts to deport undocumented residents, these otherwise illegal immigrants have discovered that if they are seeking asylum, they need not enter the U.S. illegally. Further, upon final approval of their asylum requests, which can take up to 4 years, a path to citizenship is automatically built into it. Now again, as a liberal, I have absolutely no problem with this per se. In fact, I encourage any immigrant with an asylum issue to enter the country this way rather than by trying to enter illegally. But the reality is that as more and more otherwise illegal immigrants discover this new alternative to entering the U.S., the number of asylum seekers will continue to rise, and unless there is an immediate change in federal policy towards asylum seekers, the crisis in cities and states across the nation will continue to get worse. Now, it is important to point out that asylum seekers come from various countries around the world and under different circumstances. But the ones at the center of this current crisis are for the most part from unstable and or poor countries and are themselves poor and without family ties in the U.S. As a result, these people must rely on the United States for their shelter and well-being. But the good news is that the Biden administration has just allocated $100 million to New York City to help with the crisis. In addition, 50 administrative assistants have been dispatched to help identify and register those asylum seekers who are now eligible to seek employment. This, of course, is a step in the right direction. But again, as Mayor Adams has said, more needs to be done. So what can be done? Well, first, since the federal government's executive branch has oversight, control, and responsibility for immigration, they need to play a more active and direct role in dealing with asylum seekers. This includes coordinating their transport evenly throughout the country so that no particular city is overburdened. Second, providing adequate financial and administrative assistance to cities that receive asylum seekers. Third, reducing the amount of time for them to become eligible to seek employment, which would allow them to become more self-sufficient and less reliant on government for financial support. And finally, federal laws which require the U.S. to basically accept all asylum seekers must be amended so that when the situation becomes unmanageable or rises to a crisis, the requirement can be temporarily suspended or limited until such time as the crisis is resolved and once again under control. I believe that this approach is a no-brainer and based on common sense, which should be seriously considered regardless of whatever your particular politics happen to be. But having said that, you have to keep in mind that the United States of America owes its very existence to immigration, whether voluntary or forced, such as in the case of Africans who were brought here against their will and enslaved. Either way, however, this country could not have prospered and grown the way it has without them. But ironically, the U.S. has not shown much gratitude for the key role that migrants have played in its development. So, as we attempt to resolve this current issue with asylum seekers, it is important that it is done in a way that is fair, practical, and humane, and that will ultimately be potentially beneficial to all parties involved. But what do you think? Do you agree or disagree? I'd like to hear your opinion. And of course, as always, if you like the show, please subscribe. Hey people, it's me, Roger again, and I need your help. This is a pretty new podcast, and to continue to add content to the show, I need subscriptions. So please like and subscribe by hitting the subscribe button down below. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next podcast.